start first. Yeah, maybe you will recognize what to do, and then I will explain what you can do. Yes, it's pretty good guess. Oh no, not right click, do that later. First, just you can build stuff. If you need more tiles, you can shake the tree. Just click on it, and at some point they will fall down new tiles. And now you can build your tower, castle, whatever you want. And you can rotate the tiles with the mouse wheel. And you can also change the size with the arrow keys if you selected one tile. Yeah, another important thing is here the background. Normally there are a lot of sheep, but the weather is bad, so they all went home. And hopefully they will come back when the game will be released. And yeah, the game is almost finished. There will be added a few stuff. And the deadline is the 30th of June, so I still have a little time. But yeah, the main stuff is finished. And you can also right-click on a tile. Then you are in the platform mode. And you can jump around with the VAS keys and collect the, I don't know, maybe they are fireflies.
Double jump, yeah.
Yes. And you can make right-click on other blocks, then you have more characters move at the same time. And so it's, yeah, it's not really a game, there's no goal, it's just to have, to play around, have some fun, and be inspired. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Tina?
Yeah. Right. It's any questions? That's almost everything what the game has to offer. It will offer some more stuff later, but that's basically it.
I got one. How long did it take you to do this again?
What?
How long did it take you?
Roughly about 2 weeks. I did it my spare time after university stuff, like in the evenings, and not on all days, like, you know, the hobbyist thing. Yes?
How much objects can you move until the game crashes?
I don't know. You can spawn a lot of objects and the game will slow down, as there are a lot of physics to calculate. But it doesn't really crash for now. I haven't tested so much yet.
What kind of features are you planning to implement?
No more features, just more visual eye candy, like the sheep, and.
Expecting something like kind of discovery, to put more objects like the tree in this field for kids and the players to experiment. Where do I get which object from, and when after clicking what I get other objects, and so make the world more explorable.
Yeah, this could be interesting, yes. I also planned in the beginning to have in the foreground some grass to move around, just to decorate the scene more, but it didn't really work out so much, so I scrapped it. And I spent also a lot of time in trying out the colors to find the right color concept for the game. And I'm not super satisfied with how it is now, but it's sometimes difficult to arrange the colors if you color the shapes randomly.
How difficult is it to deal with physics in Construct 2?
Very, very easy. It's just 2 clicks and an object has physics and collisions. You can adjust the values and it's no problem. I think what's more a problem if you really do something that's unnatural to physics, like to move around and not being pushed around, then the physics might go crazy and the object rotates in 360 degrees all the time. I don't know if it happened today already, but it happens fast and yeah, like this. But I think that's a problem of the physics itself, like it's box 2D physics. And yeah.
Any more questions for Ted? Yes.
Do you plan to make a series game out of this?
No. I thought about it to develop it further maybe later, but not. There's no really a plan for it. Also, a friend of mine had also a script for creating random shapes. That would be also nice, I guess, for this game, but I'm not sure if I will implement it later. Depends on the success, I guess. Yeah, if there are not more questions, I guess that's it.
Right, thank you very much for sharing, Gil. Following next, Mirko, are you on that?
Oh no.
Okay, so yeah, today I would like to talk about how to implement an ambient occlusion shader using GLSL. It's part of a prototype I'm working on for my next game. And I've sort of always been, procrastinating working with shaders because it's also spooky. But finally got to it, and I think it's really nice what you can achieve that way. So first of all, I'm going to briefly say what ambient occlusion is, what the idea is, how to render it using a shader, how I've implemented it, and how it looks finally. Okay, so ambient occlusion is basically a sort of shadow. However, it's not like a hard shadow, but more like a soft shadow. So if you look at, for example, the ceiling where the suspension it is sort of darker than the surrounding wall, but it's not a hard shadow because it's a shadow generated by all the ambient light coming from all sorts of directions. So if you use a ray tracing program like Cycles, it's actually pretty straightforward to render because you can just simulate all the light beams and look where they hit. But that takes a lot of time, so it's not really feasible to do that in real time yet. So we're going to make a workaround. So yeah, just basically the lower parts, if this is the light source, the lower parts will be darker because there are not so many light rays hitting that part. Okay, so the idea for shader-based ambient occlusion is the following, and this is known as the Crisis method because the game Crisis is apparently the first major title to use it. So we consider a certain point, for example this blue point, and we just look at the points directly surrounding this point. And we look if this point is above, so in front of this point, or behind. And then we count the number of points. So in this case we have 4 points which are ahead of our point and 3 points which are behind. And basically the more points which are ahead of us, the more we occlude that point. Obviously this has nothing to do with how it works in reality, but it's actually a pretty neat workaround and it works relatively fast and the result looks sort of correct. So yes, Crisis method, we sample the neighborhood of each pixel and calculate the ratio of pixels ahead or behind. If more than 50% of the pixels are ahead, we create a shadow, and the more pixels that are ahead, the darker the shadow gets. It's not how it works in reality, but it is very efficient. Basically, the GPU already calculates the depth of each pixel because it needs that to prevent overlapping objects. And it's actually a pretty cheap operation. Nevertheless, for it to look good, you need to make a lot of samples. So for each pixel, in this example, I take 25 samples. Actually, if you think about it, it's pretty amazing that this is possible at all, because if you think about it at full HD and having 25 samples per pixel, it's like 50 million samples in total. And it works in like a millisecond. It's like super fast, and therefore you can use it in real-time applications. Just to make clear, it's not how it works in reality, and there are some caveats as an effect. For example, the occlusion depends on the camera frustum. So for example, if you move the camera around to somewhere like here, this part, which was previously heavily occluded because it had so much stuff higher than it, is now actually pretty bright because there's not so much stuff in front of it. So changing the camera angle will change the shadows, which is, also not how it works in real life, but again, it's a sort of compromise, and it still sort of looks decent. Okay. If you're interested in working with GL shaders, I can strongly recommend shadertoy.com. Because there are so many user-generated samples, it's really quite amazing what people can do just using shader code and not actual program code. Okay, so the basic implementation is relatively simple. We clear the screen to black. We render this scene like in a completely normal way. Then we render the depth because we need to be able to count how many samples are in front and behind. We need the depth buffer. So we render that depth buffer to a frame buffer. Actually, I think I should briefly talk about the terms I'm using. A frame buffer object is basically just a texture. It's a texture which we can render to and which we can read from afterwards. And OpenGL shading language, GLSL, is the language of programs that can be executed by the graphics card, the GPU. And vertex shaders are shaders which work per vertex, and fragment shaders are also called pixel shaders because they are executed per pixel. Okay, so we render the depth buffer, and finally we run the ambient occlusion shader. And the code is actually pretty simple. So the scene I'm using for this is this sort of car tire, which is not a model I made myself. I just got it from somewhere in the internet. And you can see that it looks very unrealistic the way the lights work, because there's no occlusion. Everything basically is more or less the same shade of lighting. Okay, so how do you implement a depth buffer? Well, my first approach was like this, and this sort of shows the learning process I made while doing this. So basically I would just set the color red, green and blue to the Z coordinate, which is the depth calculated by the GPU. And it sort of works. It looks like this. Well, it's very hard to see, but this is slightly darker than this part. However, there's a problem with this approach, and you can see it very clearly when I increase the contrast. Since the frame buffer object only has 256 values per color, it looks very, there are very clearly visible gaps between these different shades. And that's a problem, because it produces very heavy artifacts if you do it like that. So I've been thinking for quite a while, and I came up with the following. This is a slight variation of the previous shader. We still take the Z coordinate, but what we now do is that we multiply it by 256 and take the practice like the modulo, the remainder, and then we subtract that from the original value, and then we put these in the red and the green coordinates. So basically by doing that, I'm expanding it from a 256 level variable to a 65 whatever thousand value variable. Basically, the red value is going to be what the gray value was in the previous one, but the green value is going to be the next 8 bits, if you like. You could do it one more time to use the blue coordinate, but I think it doesn't really make a lot of difference. Yeah? Okay, sorry. So when you do it like that, it looks like that. But by converting it backwards, you can get like the correct value. Okay, so this is basically what I figured out where I would place the samples for the ambient occlusion shader. And this is pretty much how it looks like. Basically, like I said, we just sample the depth buffer of the different coordinates. We count the number, and then we divide this number by the number of samples. We get the occlusion, and we just blend that on top of the original scene. So this is how only the ambient occlusion looks. And this is how it looks like when we blend it back to the scene. So if you compare that to the original image, you can see that the lighting looks way more realistic than it did before. And you can tweak it a bit further, adapt it to whatever use you have. You can increase or decrease the number of samples, for example, or you can change the core of the shader. And obviously you can improve the model by adding textures and colors and so on. Yeah, so that's pretty much my adventures into implementing an AO shader. Okay, thank you. So, any questions? Yeah?
You said, and it's obvious that it's dependent on the frustum.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an animation or something of the NRW? I mean, can you see it? Can you see the pattern changing? Is it noticeable? Is it distracting? Does it look
Not really. Obviously, if you take the scene from 2 angles and show the user, then it's pretty obvious. But if you just move it slightly around, I can imagine there are some geometries where it looks really odd, but for normal scenes, I haven't really noticed any problem with that.
you have a regular pattern which you sample? If you look at a spiral or something, or is it random?
Yeah, it's not random. The point is you sort of want to sample the close proximity of your fragment a bit more heavily than the outer parts. And there are many different ways to do it. So I think if you want to do it like perfectly, you would take like 1,000 samples and then have like a Gaussian shape to determine the density. But in this case, I figured like a simple spiral will do the trick. There's a bit of noise, yeah. Actually,
Do you have to get rid of it yourself, or is it in this picture and it's only that?
it depends on how strongly you multiply the ambient occlusion and how you do it exactly. If you look really close, you can see some artifacts, but it's very slight. Since I did 25 samples, basically if one sample is a bit off, for example, then you get 1/25 of a distortion, so to say. What many people do when using ambient occlusion shaders is that they make another step of blurring this result. So rendering that to another frame buffer and then running a blur shade on top of that. Personally, I didn't see much of a difference, or at least not enough difference to justify the additional computational cost. No. Okay, any more questions? Okay, so thank you.
Hi, thanks for sharing the demo.
Sure.
Okay, so this is going to be a talk about project management for games with no or low budget. I will share what I've learned during my game development. Like I said before, I developed several games for mobile and Wii U and stuff like that. What all games had were no or low budget. I did it on rev share base with all the team members, and I'm going to share some best practice or my experiences with that. So first of all, this will be an ongoing story. I don't want to rush through the theme, so I will take time to talk about it and answer questions. It's roughly 2 parts. Part 1 will be the idea of project management and why it is so important even for small projects. I think if you start a project without an overview of the whole project, you will fail. And part 2 is more focusing on Kanban and how you could organize your project with this and with your team and all. Just a short introduction of myself. I'm Manus Cleven, founded Stargush Entertainment in 2011, developed Tipp Championship. It's a famous brand of board games, soccer stuff in Germany, and also released it for mobile games and smart TVs. And our upcoming game is Dragon's Guilds, which is an arcade game, brick breaker, snake mixture, something like this. Maybe I will talk about in another meeting about it. So before I founded my studio, I worked for a short time for Gameloft and worked on a game called Age of Pirates, which was released many years ago for PC. So what is project management? Wiki says it's a discipline of initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing the work of a team to achieve specific goals and meet specific success criteria. So very blah blah blah. All in all, your role as a project manager is to keep the time, cost, and scope, also the quality and focus, and to organize everything under the 4 aspects of the project management. So maybe your question will be, what does cost mean if you have no budget or only low budget? This means that you all invest time, and the time you're spending are the costs. So it's also the time aspect here, but everybody has free time and want to finish the project sometime. Otherwise, it's not a project if you're working forever. One aspect of a project is that there is an end to the project, and this is the question of how much time will be invested into the game from all the team members. So this is some basic stuff about project management. Why do we need project management in low budget games? It helps to keep you track of the development. So if you just start thinking, okay, today I'm doing this and some graphics and stuff like this, you will lose yourself in the development process somewhere. Your team knows what to do. You know, there will be a lot of tasks in game development, even if it's a small game. So, and you only have several hours per day, or even only a few weekends where you can spend your time. And if you start, okay, what did I 2 weeks ago? Okay, where do I start today? So it's really necessary to keep things handleable for each member and to quickly go back to the stuff he was working on. Yeah, you have some time, at some point you have a game development, game design document, and you know, okay, everybody will spend like 8 to 10 hours a week. And then you're separating, we will talk about later this, but you know how much working hours are left for each task, or maybe if you have some hours that are not used, they are usually 0 hours because the project is full, you can add future features or something like this. On a revenue share based team where everybody works in free time or spare time, motivation can be a big problem. And if you have milestones and visualization of completed tasks, it's like a checklist, and doing this helps to show the progress of the game and keeps them motivated. And if a new member joins the team, or someone has left the team and a new one comes in, it's much easier to tell the people where the project is at the moment and what are the next tasks that has to be done. And you see the light at the end of the tunnel because you know when you'll be done with it, hopefully. Just try to say what no and low budget means. I said 0 to 5,000 euros, small teams, no paid jobs. So there's nobody who really gets money for the work he's doing beforehand. And it's done in leisure time or part-time, but unpaid. Maybe that's not set in stone. So maybe there is some guy who will earn money from the 5,000 euro budget. Depends on what are your skills and what your team needs in the end, and if you could find someone. But how to build a team, I will give some advices and hints also, but much later. So 4 phases of project management or of a project. This is adapted for game development. It's a book that I will introduce you later, which I recommend to read. It's only in German, I'm sorry. But as far as I know, Blue Byte also works with this structure of project management. It's 4 phases: conception, pre-production, production, and post-production. Usually you have 5 phases in project management, sorry. And yeah. So what will happen in each phase, I will go through later again, but you have an idea of it. In the first phase, in the conception, you write down the feature list, the game document, do all the stuff which will be a frame for the complete project in the end. Pre-production, you will have your team, talk to the team what is possible, which engine and stuff like this, maybe prototyping, depending on the project, the production. Yeah, you will get the game ready. Post-production is what will happen after the game is released, or you will add DLCs or something like this. Yeah, so there are different methods of organizing a project. I will stay focused on game development, only this one. You have 2 spiral systems. The left one here is used in pre- and post-production phase. I will explain why it is later. So you have your maintenance, the planning phase, the analysis, if it's possible, the design and the implementation. The pre-production means that it is implemented in some kind of document and stuff where you can keep track of what you're already decided to do. Then the spiral here is a mixture of 2 different kinds of methods to organize a project. Usually you have some kind of waterfall, which means that you're doing things step by step, and in the end of the waterfall you're exiting the step, like we'll go back here. Yeah, like the pre-production phase. Yeah, that's a waterfall. A spiral model means that you're repeating all the processes, and if you combine these 2, you have a small point where you start. This is your first running game, your demo, your prototype, whatsoever, and you're adding components to it, like features, graphics, and so on. And each time you will check if it's still in time, in budget, quality, and stuff like this. We have focused on the pyramid before. And after everything is done and everything works, the spiral will leave to the last point. This is the post-production one, which is again this spiral, because you don't have the need of checking all the features and stuff like this. It's more tiny. So, and the method it's to do this, to handle all the tasks, is the Kanban method. which I will talk next time and introduce you to Trello, which I was using all the time. It's really a nice tool to get your tasks in some kind of overview and put it to each one and keep track of what's going on with all the tasks. So that's it for today. Any questions? Okay, cool. And so it was really bad, or I said all you needed to know? Okay.
A question more like a personal thing. You mentioned you use Trello, but lately or like recently, I discovered a similar tool that seems a bit more complete called Fussball. Do you know about it?
I read about it, but I haven't used it. So because I set up everything in Trello, and so it's for me, I'm much faster with it using it. And so far, I have nothing that I miss with Trello, so I wouldn't do any changes like this. Okay.
Also, we're talking about there's one I know of, and I haven't tried it. I've tried the Trello before.
Yeah.
And there's one specifically for game development. Some guy made it for a game jam. I know it from the game dev subreddit. I don't know the name. I know there's so I know. I want to know if you know it.
Okay. No, I don't know. What I like about Trello is that it's very flexible, so you can. I have to tell about more. You have different swim lanes, and so in Trello it's very flexible, and you can adapt it to your style.
It's essentially a clone of Trello, but with some extra stuff for milestones.
Yeah, so you can. What I like about Trello is that there is an application for your smartphone, and you can check it from everywhere, so you don't have to use the browser. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. I just wrote down the type. It's Project Management in der Projektmanagement in der Medienentwicklung. It's written by former or maybe still employees from Blue Byte. Former, okay, so and it's really easy to read for beginners because it's something like a talk between two persons, and they discuss how to structure a project and what you have to think about, or where you have to be aware of, and stuff like this. Yeah.
More questions for Manus? If that's the case, then thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, hello everyone. I'd like to talk a bit about Phaser game development. I had a bit experience with Phaser in the last month, especially during the Ludum Dare 35, the last one, where I did my game completely with Phaser. And I was very surprised and astonished how easy it is to do to achieve something with Phaser. And it's working extremely well in the browser. I did not expect that, and I'm very happy to share with you some facts about it. Basically, it's a JavaScript framework. It's not an engine, as you might expect. It's a framework. It provides lots of classes, functions, utils, tools, helper classes, not tools, to create your game. It even has TypeScript support. For everybody who is not that big fan of JavaScript because of the type looseness, it has TypeScript support. And it's not an engine, it's just a collection of classes that work seamlessly together, and they use several libraries in it to bundle together. It works in all common browsers. From IE9 up and up, Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari, everything is working fine. And even on all browsers on mobile devices that came out in the past years, 4 or 5 years. And it's working really good on even these mobile devices. It's not that perfect, but it's really playable. And that's one thing I find really astonishing about Phaser. A big advantage is it uses Canvas or WebGL. Maybe these terms are familiar to you. These are HTML5 keywords. And Canvas is a way for HTML5 to draw 2D graphics into an area on the website, and WebGL is basically OpenGL for the web. It's 3D graphics. And Phaser just chooses whatever it finds and what's the fastest to use. If you specify when creating the Phaser instance, you say, Phaser, please use auto, then it picks Canvas if it's the only available, or WebGL if it finds it's there. And it covers up everything. You don't need to know what's running, it's just working as it should. You can use it for desktop and mobile games. If you want to have real native apps, you can bundle the games you create with Phaser using Cocoon or PhoneGap. Then you create apps that you can put into the Play Store or into the App Store. It's no problem. One limitation is it's for 2D only. Even though WebGL is supported, it's just for acceleration purposes. It's not used for 3D graphics. So it's for 2D games, for puzzle games, for platformers, RPG with top-down view. Everything you can imagine with 2D is basically possible. And it's fast. This is a demo of the Pixie library that's included in Phaser. You see 110,000 bunnies, each individually rotated, individually alpha blended, and individually positioned, jumping around at 60 frames per second in a browser window. And that is for a JavaScript engine, I think it's an amazing achievement. And this thing is 6 years old. This is a 6 years old laptop. So I was, great, it's just fine. Okay, you see, don't need to read it all. It's a quick overview what's all supported with Phaser. You have lots of graphics functions. You can do sprites and animation. You have particle effects. You have complete tile-based environments. If you are familiar with Game Maker, for example, and the tile-based systems, it's everything included in Phaser. You can do that as well there. You have text and font rendering, TTF, bitmap text, everything. You can draw lines, rectangles, polygon shapes, and use these as sprites as well. And for example, the camera viewport is used when you have a platformer and the camera scrolls with the view in the level. Everything included already, just need to set up, instantiate the classes, and you are ready to go. With sound, there's a bit of a drawback because with the mobile devices, there are some problems with playing multiple sounds at once. If you have sound effects that overlap each other, there are some topics that are not working fine, but that's not a limitation of Phaser, but the audio tag and the sound problems with the mobile devices, mobile browsers, have a limit here. You have physics. You can have arcade physics. It's really fast, simple physics like you know from shooters or from simple jump and run games. Or as shown with the demo, from your demo for, a couple of minutes ago, you have exact correct physics with polygons and individual shapes and everything else. Yeah, what I find extremely helpful is the state machine that Phaser includes. I'll come to that in a later step. This is a basic setup of a standard game, like it would run in Phaser. You have a boot step. In this boot step, you load a progress bar, just one image. Then, if it's loaded, you show this, and while this is shown and it grows, you start loading the other assets. If you would load all assets at once, you would see a black screen until everything is finally loaded. And this is nothing somebody wants to see in a browser window. So you see something is loading and it's going on. Then you switch to a title screen. You go to select a level you want to play. You play the level, and you get to the results screen and your achievements. And these are all states. These are all separate Java objects that extend a Phaser object. And you can reuse them in all cases. You can jump all over, forth and back just by saying, now switch to state so-and-so. You have the possibility to rearrange your game design, your flow through the application, just by changing how the states are called in which order. Here's a bit code. This is how a typical game state looks like. You have a preload function. This is here in case you did not want to load everything at once at the beginning. You can, for each state, you can do a little preload if you really need to. The create function is called. as soon as a state gets active, you can initialize sprites, take positions, create the world, and place everything in its correct position. The update function is, I think, the most common and known to everybody. This update function is called for each frame to update your game logic, to reposition the sprites, to start and stop animations, react on inputs, and so on. The render function is just here for completeness. It's not necessary in usual, because as soon as you tell Phaser, here's a sprite, I place it there, then it is there and it is drawn. And if you change the properties, it is automatically adjusted and replaced and moved as it should. This is just for really rare special cases if you need to do something special that Phaser does not do on its own. I'm sorry. The shutdown function is the one that is called as soon as the state is left, so you can clean up everything or hand over some information to the next state, whatever you need to do in this case. This is an example of how Phaser is initialized. In your HTML, you have a div tag with an ID, and then you have this code, and this is everything you need to initialize Phaser. You basically tell Phaser, please make my game in this size. Here you tell him what renderer to use. Auto means pick the fastest. Canvas or WebGL, whatever you find. This is the object in your HTML page, the DOM object you want to have the game shown in. Then we add some states. These are the states object we saw on the last slide. And then with this statement, state.start, you run a specific state, and the game starts to play at this point. Yeah. Good. This is the basic overview of how sprites are placed. You have a stage. The stage is always there, and you have a world in the stage. The world is always cleared when a new stage arrives. So if you are in the title and you switch to gameplay, the world is cleared, and you just have to fill the world with something you need in your game. You don't need to remove it from the title screen because it's cleared automatically, and the sprites are placed hierarchically in a tree. It's easier. And every sprite has a position, has an anchor point around which is rotated. And using this, you can, for example, achieve very easily animations using the limb separation system. If you have all the animations of separated body parts, it's quite easy to do. This is a short example how sprites are loaded. Every asset within Phaser, every asset is referenced via a key. In this case, a sprite, an image, is named star, and the sprite sheet is named button. The sprite sheet just contains multiple sprites in one image to save space and loading time. And in the rest of the game, you just refer to these key names, and you can reuse them. There are some blind spots with Phaser. One is networking. There is no networking code in it besides some really, really, really basic stuff. And if you want to have multiplayer, you have to use third-party libraries like Socket.io, for example, or directly program WebSockets on your own. And you need additional tools. Some not free, some not so good are free, to create audio sprites, for example, or Sprite Atlas, where sprite sheets and the multiple sprites and the animations are plugged into one big image map. And one thing I came across, a Ludum Dare problem, the mouse capturing is not working reliably. So that's a bad thing to know. I strongly urge you to visit the Phaser.io website just to have a great time and look at the 678 examples they have on the page. That's awesome. Every feature they have in the engine is documented as an example with full source code and explained, and you can, even there is a link to a page where you can hack in the code in the browser and just play and run the Phaser stuff. And you don't need to install it on your local machine. You can experiment right in the browser if you want to try out something. Yeah, and that's for my presentation so far. Thank you for your attention. I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Stefan?
Maybe wasting your time or something. Can you use features, for example, a WebGL specific? I don't know what WebGL does. But if you want to use shaders, or if you want to decide your game needs to Could you do it and then restrict it to WebGL and then with the canvas?
Yeah, you can say phaser, please use only WebGL. And there is a phaser plug-in connector where you can plug in own phasers. You are still limited to 2D graphics, but you can add effects, for example, blurring, or for example, if you want to have the color correction, chroma key, or something like that, this can be done using phasers, yes, shaders, yeah. But not something with 3D. It's just limited to just pixel-wise to the fragment shader. Yeah. You just can change the fragment shader. That's the only thing, yeah.
And in the example with the bunnies, did you do something special like instancing or something, or did you just put in 10,000 bunnies and it was passed?
Yeah, I just let me see. Oh, Moment. Jetzt kann ich nicht gucken. Ja. Moment. Nee, Quatsch. Das ist der Bunny Mark. Offline. That should work now. So, this is a bunny mark. You can create bunnies. Now we have only 21,000 and still 60 frames, and we can create even more and more and more. It's a bit slower now because it's running on battery. It's the CPU power is reduced now.
I was wondering if you had to do something like instancing or something, or the example you use it. I would do it the most naive way possible if it would be just that fast. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. I did not look at the example, but in the description it says they're just using the normal API functions, but they heavily optimized the GPU usage. They tried out how the rendering is and how the ordering of rendering commands is used, and they optimized it so that no deadlocking and no waiting states appear to achieve this performance. And they are still working on it to improve it further.
Any more questions for Stefan? Then if that's it, thank you very much for sharing, Stefan.